Right guys, a while ago you may have remembered I did a video where I was going to do an experiment with the Compex. Basically I was taking out all of my weight training completely and utterly and just literally using the Compex entirely. What I was doing, I was using it through full range of movements. So for biceps I'd take it into the shortened position, take it all the way out into the lengthened position and repeat. If you remember on my last video, I completely give myself severe levels of DOMS, possibly even verging on rhabdomyolysis, with the amount of pain and swelling and things I caused locally. But yeah, the next week I adjusted it and found the right levels. So I gave it a few weeks go, and with the plan and intention of doing it for quite some months. The dilemma is, after probably several weeks, I started to realize that it wasn't really working. Now obviously it was a really interesting experiment because it kind of gave me an insight into what builds muscle. So we know that obviously mechanical tension, so the actual load itself, the metabolite element and the muscle damage from the eccentric overload are the real triggers for muscle growth. Now, as I mentioned in the previous video with the Compex is not going to get any metabolites, and it's not really creating any mechanical tension, no real loading. So it's primarily focusing on the eccentric muscle damage component of muscle building. So I was always interested to see how big of an effect the eccentric component was in total for muscle building. Now obviously in hindsight now, what it realizes is that we know from, if you remember the previous videos I did ages ago where I actually gained strength and I gained muscle size from training with the Compex alongside and with normal weight training. So we know that it does have a positive effect. I use it all the time in clinic, and I get people stronger actually just by using it. So it does build muscle. As we know, muscle damage and eccentric overload do cause muscle to grow. The reality for me, I was going from an optimized training program which involved muscle damage, mechanical loading and metabolites, down to just eccentric training. So in reality, what it highlighted, which was probably sensibly now looking back at it, was probably logical, is that it isn't as effective as using all three components of muscle building by just using one. What it also highlights is that using just eccentrics alone, maybe eccentrics is a component, but not the biggest component. In reality, I think there's evidence to support that mechanical tension, the loading itself, is probably the biggest component of muscle building and obviously strength gaining. It doesn't mean that adding in eccentric overload and metabolites don't accentuate and increase that effect. They do, but the proportions are probably getting a bit more interesting now, where we're looking at mechanical tension being probably the biggest one. Debatable which one after that comes next. But certainly if we do eccentrics on its own, with Compex on its own, it is beneficial, but not as beneficial as a full loading resistance program. Now if you add some eccentric work into it, as I found in my previous videos on using the Compex to build strength, and I also built size, with including it into my program, I gain more. So it does seem like it does have a benefit above and beyond normal training when included as an accessory, but on its own as a standalone, unless you're really weak and unless you're unable to train with mechanical tension, then obviously it's a viable option. So if you've got an injury, or there's some reason you haven't got a gym, you can train with it. You could train with it on holiday where there isn't a gym and still gain some positive effect. From my perspective, I obviously realized it wasn't quite as good as my normal training, so I cut the experiment short as I already learned what I needed to learn, and I've gone back into my normal training. So overall then, in summary, it's a very useful tool, very good if you're trying to train with an injury, around an injury, or haven't got access to the equipment. It does bring about changes in muscle and in strength, but it is best done alongside normal training. And getting that mechanical tension is the king of all of it, really. So anyway, that concludes this video, and I'll catch you next time. We want to keep making great content for our subscribers, so if anyone would like to support the channel by making a pledge, then we would be extremely grateful, and you can do this on our Patreon page here.